There's a story where if one puts a frog in a pot of water and brings it to boil, the change happens so slowly the frog doesn't notice, fails to jump out of the pot, and is therefore cooked. This is the boiling frog story. Welcome to my podcast, Episode 7, Confessions of a Gen Activist. True crime stories. Cue the music. On the last episode, we ended off in 2001. 9/11 had just happened. The peak of anti-globalization organizing and protesting had come and gone, and we're now into a new era. I find myself living in Toronto again, still. I guess now this is the second time that I'm living out there now. So it's going good, and it's time to reinvent myself and find a way to coexist within the activist movement and be able to make a living at it at the same time. You might remember that I picked up a job as a barista at the Alternative Grounds Cafe on Roncesvalles in Toronto. That was a great little gig, but it didn't pay a whole ton, and I wasn't picking up any heavy work with regards to videography and photography and hanging around a lot of activists. So what I did is one New Year's Eve, I guess it's New Year's Day 2002, I sat down with my notepad and I started writing out the beginnings of what would then become Boiling Frog, a small little organization that ended up becoming a large organization, working from coast to coast to coast, producing and distributing activist media, essentially. I didn't know how I was going to pull that off, really. I didn't have any capital, didn't have any money to start with, but there was some material out there, and I did have some experience in capturing events, putting it onto videotape, making homemade copies of those videotapes, going out to other events, asking people, if they'd like to buy that videotape for $10, able to make a little bit of money here and there. So, borrowing on that idea, I approached the Toronto Video Activist Collective, TVAC, and they were at the time, I think, working on Video Active 4 or Video Active 3. It was a compilation of short videos from different political and social justice and environmental actions that had taken place throughout the Toronto and Southern Ontario region, possibly Quebec. I'm going to put those together on compilation tapes, VHS tapes, which a lot of you probably have never even seen. VHS tapes. It's been a while, almost 20 years now since they've come and gone. So they had this video active compilation tape, and I approached them and I asked them if I could take 3 of those tapes on consignment and for $10 a piece. And what I would do is I would turn around and sell them for $15 or $20 a piece, use that money, pay TVAC back, buy a few more tapes, and then therefore, I was able to just slowly build up this business. Now, how I would do that was any number of different talks or teach-ins or rallies or protests or gatherings. There was something always happening in Toronto. I would show up, and it'd be very easy just to set up shop at a little table, put out a few videotapes, maybe some books and what have you, some T-shirts, and people would buy those. It was very good, and it started to build quite well. And I was finding a lot of success in coordinating with a lot of like-minded organizations. So I would approach them. They were putting on an event, and I would approach them and say, I've got this small organization. I would like to come and table and show my wares, and I've got these videos and these books and some zines and some T-shirts, etc., etc. And it would be a nice mutually beneficial thing to happen. And most people did agree with that. I was able to continue to grow it, getting into tons of events. And at each event that I'm at, I would meet other people who were vending, who were selling their wares. Sometimes I would get consignments in that regard. And just connecting with other people that were doing the tabling was very nice. It worked in very well with a lot of anarchist book fairs that were growing and popping up in cities all over the place. I remember one anarchist book fair in Toronto, and I forget the name of the gentleman, young activist, who I was speaking with at that activist fair. And he was talking about an idea that he had to make a film which involved taking clips from a lot of different Hollywood films and just mashing them together to tell a story, to tell an activist story. And he was concerned that, copyrights, and he wouldn't be able to get away with it, and, there'd be a lot of problems and headaches in trying to make that come together. And I just simply encouraged him just to do it anyways, just go ahead, like, who cares? Like, nobody's going to come after you, and if they do, the extra attention that it's going to gain for your video is going to be just that much better. So he puts together this beautiful little compilation video and called it The Red Pill. Amazing video. I took it on myself. I did a number of different screenings and brought him on as a guest at a number of different community screening events that we organized. He ended up getting that film put into a number of different film festivals, and he traveled far and wide around the world, really, talking about that film and about activism and the messages therein that it contained. It was quite exciting. Something else that really brought people together and something that was a real hot commodity for people to have at all these tabling events and different things were zines. Now, I don't have one to show you in my hand, but it's just simply a folded white paper with text, very easy to take apart, copy, fold back together, and distribute. So these zines, a lot of it in the punk scene, a lot of it in the DIY scene, a lot of the environmentalists and Food Not Bombs and activist organizations would use these zines as a very, very cheap, easy way to communicate the printed word and get out a number of different organizing manuals into people's hands all across the world, really. Now, I was able to collect these zines at ever-growing numbers and then easily deconstruct them, head down to the local copy shop, copy out hundreds and hundreds and thousands of these zines, and then, spend the day or two, folding them together, ordering them, stacking them. And then at the various different events that I would go to, I would have a number of these different zines for people to browse and take away. And how I would price the zines is they were just simply by donation. So if you didn't have any money, you could take some zines. If you had some money, you could leave some money. And it worked out pretty well. People were generally fairly honest and fairly fair with that. I don't think I had one person ever come by and just clean me out and not give me any money. So it was a real nice way to sort of keep that little bits of cash flow coming in to keep supplying more and more photocopies for more and more zines, but also help grow my fledgling little business / organization to source out other materials, other videotapes, other books, and these different types of things, and slowly grow and grow and grow this little business. Now, as a part of the Boiling Frog idea, it wasn't enough to just coordinate with other groups that were holding events. What I wanted to do is to host my own events and promote the activist video, the activist media, with video screenings. So I think our first place, there's a picture in a book, Max, that I have that I've shown you, and I might leave a link for it here in the end. But Bridget and I were living up above Kelt's Pub. So this is Yonge and Dundas. Is it Yonge and Dundas? No, Dundas and Bloor in Toronto, right on the corner of Dundas and Bloor, right up on the third floor there. And on the main floor, there was a pub called Kelt's Pub, and in their basement, they had a secondary pub, a little basement area, there were a pool table and some chairs, and most of the time it wasn't occupied. So I'd made an arrangement with the bar owners that I would bring people into the bar that would probably spend money on food and drinks, and he would let me use the space for free on a Tuesday. So they agreed. It was great, and I started promoting, and this carried on for well over a year, where we were screening films and videos in this basement pub at the Kelt's Pub. It was quite fun. And in the beginning, we were just using televisions, right? So just, a giant TV, maybe 2 TVs, different spots, and long cables and splitters and this type of thing, and do the viewing in that way. It would be later on, I think in 2003, where I ended up picking up a job helping to produce a film about 9/11. It was called The Great Conspiracy. So I helped produce that film. I was the floor producer, and I did a lot of the research and the pre-production on it. And I got paid fairly well for my participation in that. And with that pay, I purchased a video projector. Now, my partner at the time, Bridget, she didn't think that was a great use of the money because they were expensive back then. It was like $1,500 to buy a video projector. But I was convinced that this was a good spend. And it turned out to be a very good spend, because now we could do these screenings. We didn't have to worry about finding a TV and wheeling it out, and having just a small surface. This is before giant TVs exist, or even flat screen TVs. I think they were just starting to come onto the market. So having this projector, all we basically needed was a flat whitish surface, and we could make projections. And then I just needed a little portable sound system to accompany that. Now, a lot of places, they would have a sound system I could plug into, but what I did is I had a little boombox, little ghetto blaster with my AV inputs, my audio inputs, and my projector. So I had the ghetto, had the projector, had a little portable DVD player. I don't even think I had a laptop or anything at the time. And then I had my suitcase filled with books and zines and videos and whatnot. So that whole setup, I was mobile. I was able to move the little Boiling Frog organization on two wheels with a suitcase and stacked up. And I had my projector on one arm and the boombox over here, and another backpack with assorted personal things. And we did great. Besides the regular Tuesday night screenings down at Kelt's Pub, I was doing 2 or 3 screenings a week in various locations around Toronto. One regular event ended up being a video screening on live radio, which is very strange. It was called Nat Radio. It was I think it's all online now and it's still running. We'd have to check that out, and if it is, I'll leave a link below. But we would show up at Nat Radio and we would screen a film to a small audience in the radio studio, maybe 4 or 5 of us. We'd talk about the film and listen to the film, and this would all go out on the radio. So this is like early reaction videos, but on podcasting, on radio. It was very strange. And we would organize screenings coordinating with other events that were happening. So if there was a big protest or a big teach-in or a big rally that was happening, we would try and plug into that and then set up a side event where we could screen a film that might show a particular subject or talk about an issue that was being discussed in a larger area. So we were basically trying to piggyback onto a bunch of different events and a bunch of different issues, and then thereby amplify those issues. So with the point of Boiling Frog being activist focused, it occurred that there was actually quite a lot of people, more and more people that were producing activist video, whether it be writing the books or the zines or doing the radio programs and the podcasts or the videos and the photography, et cetera, et cetera. There was a lot of content that was coming out there, but there was a bottleneck where that content wasn't really necessarily available to the activists that could benefit from it, that could learn from it. So the whole point of Boiling Frog was kind of open up that bottleneck and be of service to the activists and to civil society by making available to them the materials produced by other activists. It sounded pretty good. It certainly was welcomed by a lot of different organizations and activists and organizers, not only in Toronto, but across Canada. It wouldn't be uncommon in the years to come that when people would meet us, Bridget or I, and we'd introduce ourselves, say, yeah, we're with Boiling Frog, this small little organization. They're like, wow, Boiling Frog, wow, I've heard of you guys. And it would always amaze us that people would have heard of Boiling Frog, this small little organization. It never paid. I never took a salary or ever got a wage from it. But it would generate little bits of income here and there that would help go towards our daily expenses and certainly go towards the rebuilding of reinvestment back into the organization and all the different projects that we did, whether it be traveling to other cities to put on film festivals, or just cover our daily expenses, our daily bread, if you will. I had to pause for a minute just to collect my thoughts. I realized that I'd been rambling on for well over 10 minutes, and I forgot that off the top I wanted to mention and show you this awesome t-shirt that I'm sporting today of the Saskatchewan Green Party. It's the 4th of October 2024, and they have just started their provincial election out in Saskatchewan. So I'm going to dedicate this particular episode to Naomi Hunter and the Saskatchewan Green Party, and may you have a very successful and fun election. Max, you'll remember when we went out and helped Naomi in the election. What's this? I guess it would be the pandemic year, 2020. Naomi, I apologize. We're not offering or being of much help for you this year. But I'm sure in your capable hands, you got a lot of great people working on the campaign. It's going to be fantastic. I wish you all the best. Okay, so where was I? Talking about Boiling Frog. It's 2002. Right off the start of this organization, we were organizing around the 2002 G8 meetings that were set to come up in June or July in Kananaskis, Calgary, Alberta. So we put together a short little program, number of different films, and started organizing with other activist groups across the country. So, for example, we'd got in touch with the Mondragon in Winnipeg, and they were a volunteer-run, I think, vegan cafe, activist-oriented, collectively run, and they really supported the activist scene, the anti-globalization activists, these types of things. So we contacted them, said, this is what we're doing. We're coming across the country, we're organizing, we're showing videos, having like little mini film festivals in different locations. Could we come there and have a screening and do a little talk? And of course they said, sure, that would be great. And these are all very informal relationships that we're building. There was never any money changing hands to rent rooms or to pay for speakers or anything like that. Most of the time we're crashing at friends' house. Actually, all the times we're crashing at friends' house. We never ever rented a room. But we would camp or, figure out our own accommodations in that regard. Didn't have to sleep out because there was always in every town, in every city, activists that were like-minded that wouldn't mind putting us up and lending us a hand. So we're traveling across the country. The goal is to go from Toronto to Calgary, raise awareness around the G8. We stopped in Winnipeg, as I mentioned, at the Mondragon, and we thought it would be very exciting. We had a Via Rail pass. We were traveling by train, and noticed that the train went from Winnipeg up to Churchill, Manitoba. So what we did is we took the train all the way up to Churchill. You wouldn't believe this. It's not that far on the map geographically, but it took almost 24 hours for that train to get all the way up to Churchill. Primarily because the landscape up there and with climate change, and it's kind of buckling and it's soft, so the train can't go at speed. It's got to just crawl along like 10K, it seemed. You could get out and walk faster than the train was moving. Very exciting. Went up to Churchill, Manitoba. It was unannounced and unplanned, so as soon as we get there, we thought, well, we got to find a way to put on a little screening, a little community event. There's got to be somebody in town that's going to be interested in the G8 and the anti-globalization activism and the organizing around that. So we found a space, we found a little university or high school or something, got in touch with them. They said that we could use one of their rooms. And then we just set out trying to find somebody that might be interested in coming to this event. And we found one person who also ended up being our guide. Took us on a wonderful tour across out onto the ice. It was May. It was late April or early May 2002 that we were there. So we went out onto the ice, and there was an old fort, Prince Andrew, Prince William. I don't know. I'll have to look it up. An old fort that he took us to on Skidoo, which was kind of exciting. Gave us some local history of the town, of the area, of the people. We bought a couple of carvings from him, ivory carvings, a little polar bear, I believe, and maybe a little whale. Where is that? I'm sad I don't have my little polar bear to show you. And he was our one and only attendee for the event that we put on, showing the videos, which was kind of nice, but also kind of sad. We were able to get onto the local television. They had it was just a channel that would run on people's homes. They would just show the events, like, oh, there's bingo on Thursday, or on Friday, this is happening down at Fred's Cafe, or whatever. And we were able to get on there and get an announcement out for this event. Unfortunately, small town, only a half a day of organizing, but we did get one person. It was quite exciting. Now, the sad part of that, oh yes, it was early May, because it was Mother's Day the following morning, where I had called my mom, wish her a Mother's Day. She's back in Edmonton. And that was when I found out that she was sick, that she had been diagnosed with cancer. It was very, very sad. And she would pass away the following January. So that put a downer on things. We take the train back to Winnipeg, and then we moved on to Saskatoon. I think we put on an event here, and then off to Edmonton, where we also put on an event. I started organizing for the G8, which was soon to be coming up in Calgary, and it's going to be attracting people from all over the continent and all over the world. It's a very large event. Certainly the leaders from G8 countries, but activists from all over the world would join us as well. Now I've got some fantastic IndyMedia memories from the 2002 G8 gathering. That was when I first coordinated with and got involved with an organization called IndyMedia. And they became very popular. They were popping up in city after city after city. So it was basically volunteer-run, anarchist-based, sort of, libertarian IndyMedia perspective. Putting stuff out there, mostly photographs. Video wasn't really working that well on the internet. And at every event, every large gathering that would happen, there would have to be an IndyMedia Center that was set up. So you've got volunteers that are rounding up computers and scanners and all the cabling and everything that we needed to run a center. So on the days of action, people could come and plug in and bring their videotapes and their video cameras and their photographs and bang out a story and get stuff out to the world. That was quite exciting, getting involved with the IndyMedia. And so they called them IMC, IndyMedia Centers. We had set one up, IMC Calgary. It was quite exciting. I think we had IMC Edmonton maybe as well for a while. I wonder what's happened to the IMCs. I'll have to check into that, take a look online and see if any of the IMCs are still up and about. I do have one of their t-shirts somewhere here, or at least a photo of wearing that t-shirt. I ran into, this is where I connected with a fellow around the 9/11 issue. He was producing a magazine. Oh my gosh, my memory fails me. Can't remember the name of the magazine right now, but I do have copies just over in that box over there. I can see it. I'd met him. I'm still doing my boilingfrog thing. He hooked me up with like a box, 60 of these magazines on consignment that then I could sell and try and make a few dollars on. I was doing photography, I was doing videography on the street, connecting with the IndyMedia, connecting with the activists, and also getting into some good trouble at a benefit concert that took place in downtown Calgary. So this is June, it's a hot summer night, full concert hall, all these different acts, including Bruce Cockburn, which I was really excited about, and Jack Layton, who I might mentioned, hooked up with us at an activist event at an action in Toronto the year prior. He'd come out to Calgary. He's federal NDP leader at the time. So it was interesting. I got to meet him, and as I'd mentioned, if you remember, I was making postcards, so a lot of the photographs I was making, I would stick them onto a cutout piece of cardboard or cardstock and make photographs. In every action that I went to, I would have a collection of photographs, usually from the last action or previous actions, and show people when I get a chance, and people would find interesting shots and offer me cash or donations for these postcards. It was a fun little way to get my work around, and also a fun little way to make a few extra dollars on the side. So I remember that in my collection I had a picture of Jack Layton from a previous demonstration, previous event. I said, just 1 minute, I want to give you a photograph of yourself. He was very happy about that. It was nice to meet him. And another person that I worked to meet at that event was Bruce Cockburn. I'd seen him already in concert a couple of times. I was excited to meet him up close, meet him in person. And because I was with the media around this event, I had backstage access, and I went backstage, and I'm roaming around, and I'm in these back hallways, turns, and I didn't know where I was, but I was very excited. And I come around a corner, and there's Bruce Cockburn. He's about to go on. He's just sitting there quietly tuning his guitar, and I was kind of startled, and he was kind of startled, and I said, "Oh, geez, sorry, I don't mean to bug you, and just really quickly, mind if I take your picture?" He said, "Sure, no problem." I didn't think to take a selfie, or I was so nervous and stupid, I didn't even think to focus my camera properly. So I took a blurry picture of Bruce Cockburn. It was kind of dumb. Anyways, we had the concert. That was great. There was hundreds, thousands of people that showed up in Calgary for the G8 protest. It was a big celebratory protest to try and tell our leaders that we didn't like the direction that they were going. We didn't like the race to the bottom. We thought that human rights and environmentalism and just everything that's good, like we don't want war. We want investments into education. We want investments into health. We want people to have their own sovereign say-so over the territories that they lived in as well. So these were all very, very important issues that we're working on, what we're trying to communicate. And the leaders, as you know, still same to this day, they don't give a crap. They got their own agenda. They're working for the corporate agenda. They're following the money. They know who pays the piper, who butters the bread. They know where their bread is buttered. I don't know, what's the metaphor, what's the analogy I'm looking for? Regardless, you get the point. We're working to tell them we need a better world, and they're actively working to convince us that they're making a better world where they're actually not making a better world. So G8 went ahead, came and gone, 2002. I find myself now staying in Alberta because my mom, Max, your grandma, she had recently been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and not given very long to live at all. So I'd stayed back in Edmonton to help take care of my mom. She was also, besides being recently diagnosed with death, or given a death sentence. What do you call that? Prescribed death? No, she was predicted, death prediction. At any rate, that's pretty grim. She ended up becoming homeless, which is totally messed up. That's a whole other story that I'm not going to go into right now. But she ends up homeless. Thankfully, my brother and his girlfriend Sarah were able to take her in. They had a nice little place up in the Highlands in Edmonton, not far off of Ada Boulevard. If you know the city, it sounds really, really posh, but they were actually at a really normal, very modest house that they were renting there. So Mom got to spend her last days, her last months, at least being housed and being loved and being taken care of, which was very, very nice. While still in the city, I'm still working on my Boiling Frog activism. I'm still organizing events and putting on screenings and this type of thing. And I put on the Boiling Frog's first birthday. I think we did the first birthday at Queen Alexandra Hall. So this is the same hall that was used for the FTAA teach-ins, other anti-globalization teach-in that I'd been to the year or two previous and recorded a session by Maud Barlow. We're back at Queen Alexandra Hall celebrating the first anniversary of Boiling Frog. Opened it up to a number of different organizations that came and tabled. Other activist media distributors had come and tabled. We had video showing and film showing all weekend. We got the media involved. The Edmonton Journal covered it. The Weekly Entertainment newspaper covered it. We got a piece on Global TV, former ITV. So these are the studios down on the south side. Same studios, interestingly enough, that recorded a lot of the SCTV, Second City TV shows, way back in the late 1970s. So that was kind of cool. Got a lot of coverage for these events. It was Boiling Frog's first birthday. Again, I'm running this organization. I got no money. I've got no budget. So it's all just kind of on a wing and a prayer and scraping together dimes and quarters here and there to pay for the deposit on the hall in hopes that enough people come to the hall and they donate their $5, $10, $20 that we can raise enough money to pay for the hall and maybe have a little bit extra to reinvest back into videos, more equipment. I didn't even have my projector at this time, so it's still early days. So imagine this hall where you've got the stage up at the front, and I had two giant TVs on the stage, one on each side. So depending on where you were, you got a little bit better of a view. But these aren't big TVs, like maybe 26-inch TVs, and these are the big deep ones, like the heavy heavy TVs that, people just don't want anymore. You can't even give them away. They're just awful. I think I dragged one from, I had to borrow these two TVs and get somebody to give me a ride and lift them into their car, and it was a big schmozzle. But regardless, it was a good event. I remember that my dad came down to the event. He was quite impressed at the scope and the amount of people that we had coming, and the enthusiasm that it had generated. He was proud of me. We had a woman, an African woman, I think she had her own restaurant, but she came and did the catering for the film festival throughout the weekend. So we had some really excellent vegetarian and vegan food throughout the entire weekend. Turning the Tide, they were brand new. They're just a tiny little organization. I don't even think they had their store yet. But they showed up and did some tabling. And some other folks. There was the Edmonton Small Press Association, ESPA, Linux, and some other folks, different activist organizations that had come. Again, to table their wares, maybe be a guest speaker for some of the films that were being showed, and just generally take in the vibe. So that took place in January of 2002, and it was a bittersweet moment. At the time, my mom, your grandma, she was dying, and it wasn't going to be long, but I still, life has to go on. I'm trying to build something. So I have this quite successful first anniversary of our organization with a film festival, getting tons of media coverage and tons of community support, and that feels really good. But when it was all said and done, my mom was dying, and she would pass away on January the 18th of 2002. Sorry, not 2002, 2003 January. So it was 2002 that we did the organizing that Boiling Frog had first started out. We had the G8. Mom got her cancer diagnosis. Early 2003, Boiling Frog turns 1. Mom passes away shortly thereafter. And when all things are wrapped up in that regard, I end up moving back to Toronto. This time taking a bunch of stuff with me. It looks like it's going to be more of a permanent move, and things are working out well with Bridget. So I moved back to Toronto, stayed with Bridget. 2002, just keep building up Boiling Frog, doing the screenings, getting around to different events throughout the town, organizing with other activists, and just generally trying to be part of the scene, trying to be useful, trying to make a little bit of extra money, trying to make a living and make a difference in the world. So that's basically the main motivation, right? Like, what am I going to do? How am I going to conduct my life? How am I going to make a living, but have some meaning? So this was important to me. My mom, just to get back to it for a bit, when she was on her way out, and I was spending a lot of time with her one day, she asked me, she said, well, why are you so upset? Why are you so sad about things all the time? Because I would always, I'd be getting sour about politics or the environment and talking about all these things that generally weren't discussed in the mainstream. And it's fairly negative, right? The planet's heating up, wars are uncontrollable, right? We've got all these chemicals in our environment. It's a real downer. So my mom wanted to know, what was behind that? Why was I always so down, and what was I thinking? So one night I spent, must have been 3 hours. I was just running at the mouth, just, these are all the things that are on my mind. These are all the things that I've learned about. These are all the things that have happened, all the things that are happening in the world that bring me down. And this is what motivates me to want to try and do something for the world, do something positive. Now, although she didn't quite understand, why somebody would want to try and get involved and try and make something better that maybe wasn't going to get better, because, these things weren't new, she would tell me. The rich and the people in power, they've always been the way they are, right? The people have always got the short end of the stick. That's the way it is, and that's the way it was, and that's the way it always will be. Now, of course, I wasn't going to stand for that. I thought, well, maybe, but we should try. We should try and make the world a better place. So that was my motivation to do that. And although my mom didn't quite understand why I would want to bang my head against the wall trying to make a difference. At least she now had an understanding of the motive. So what am I trying to say? She didn't understand it for herself. It's not a choice that she would have made herself, but at least now she started to appreciate, started to respect where I was coming from and where my motivations were. So that was nice, and I guess we're a little bit blessed. My mom and I were able to come together and spend so much time in her last months, and that I did have the life that was flexible enough that I could spend that time with her. So I'm blessed in that regard. And moving forward, it wouldn't get any easier. There's going to be a lot of tragedy coming up in the next little while. In early 2003, a good friend passes away. Another good friend, upon hearing the news, is driving to be with friends and family, gets hit by a truck, killed. Super sad year. A lot that was going on. So that was 2003. I'm going to get into that on the next episode. This one, episode 7, I don't know if it's been my best episode. I feel a little bit disjointed. I've had to start and stop a couple times. I don't know if, maybe just in general, am I losing steam on this project? Am I getting close to the end? And that feels like it's kind of depressing a little bit. Like, what am I going to do after? I've talked about, maybe extending this podcast series, bringing on guests, other Gen Xtivists, to talk about their experiences. Certainly those that have been mentioned and people that have been part of my close group. We're going to start with my old friend Brent. He was in town a couple weeks ago or last week. We missed the opportunity to get together and record our podcast, but we're still talking about that. He's up in Fort St. John at the moment, working at the Site C Dam, which, if you don't know, you should look into it. Site C, it's the third site on the Peace River that's holding back water, generating electricity, generating power for British Columbia. It's also, that Peace River watershed flows all the way into northern Alberta, into Lake Athabasca, which then flows into Great Slave Lake, and then flows up the Mackenzie River into the Beaufort Sea? The Beaufort Sea and the Arctic Ocean. So very, very, very big watershed, Peace River watershed. And my friend Brent, he works at the Site C. He's the environmental guy, making sure that no animals are harmed, and everybody's doing their recycling, and they're doing everything proper up on the site. So we hope to get him on the show, and maybe some others on the show. And I had an idea for a garden variety show. And this is an idea that I've been kicking back and forth in my mind for a long time, ever since Bridget and I put on that show in The Hague. This would be early 2001, when we put on that variety show that never got recorded, never made it to the internet. So I've always had this idea of the garden variety show. Maybe that's something to take on and move forward. I thought about doing a daily news program, something to stay relevant, something to stay working, and something hopefully to earn a little bit of income. Otherwise, this gig, it's not sustainable. Obviously, I'm doing this on my own time. This isn't a big surprise. That's what people do on YouTube, creating their own stuff. And after about 4 or 5 or 10 years, you might be able to build up the followers and the support to start earning a little bit of an income, especially if you're dealing with topics such as activism or anything that's important, right? Peace, love, understanding, clean environment. None of those things really play that well in the corporate world of the internet. Now, if I'm doing like react videos of pop songs, I might be a success. But we're not doing that yet. We'll see. So I don't know where it's going. Now I'm just rambling. I think I'm just basically trying to fill up time, and maybe I'm trying to sabotage my program and hope that you never come back and listen to another show, because this is so darn boring. Except for Max, of course. Because the primary reason, Max, was that I could at least share all these personal stories so that you could know all the different activist-y things that your dad has gone through in his life. Anyways, blah, 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 activist this, activist that. It's October 2024. And I've got nothing else to say about that. So, Adieu.